Hi, thank you, Jack, for inviting me. I'm Denise, and I'm a compulsive eater, anorexic, bulimic, and also an alcoholic and an addict. But I weigh and measure 3 meals a day only from the gray sheet. I commit them to my sponsor on a daily basis, verbally in person, and I eat those meals no matter what, and don't eat between meals no matter what. If there's a problem, I pick up the phone and make a phone call. I also do not keep numbers just in my cell phone. I have about 4 different phone books. I keep one in my car. I keep one in my purse. I keep couple in the house. I put by people's names, what time zones they're in, what their professions are, what their age is, so I know, or if they've done something special that I might need help with. I didn't learn to do this right away. I was 12-step into OA in 1984 by my psychiatrist in Los Angeles, who said I had a disease that he couldn't cure, and I was on the anorexic end of this disease. I did not want to go to OA. I didn't think I had a problem. I just had to get the right number. And, but I went because I didn't want him to harp on me every time I went in to see him, and I was seeing him 3 times a week. And thank God for Blue Cross Blue Shield federal employees insurance, which got me through that. But anyway, I went, I wasn't impressed at all. It was a women's stag meeting. The only people that I was impressed with were the active anorexics. Those I really wanted to learn how to really fine-tune things. Some reason I got a sponsor. They were taking the food plans out of the meeting at that time and saying, you make your own abstinence, which, to me, that's like telling an alcoholic, you make your own sobriety. You can drink vodka because it's white and it's clear, but you can't drink any of the other liquors because they're not pure. So I kept relapsing with my own abstinence. My sponsor, after about a year, moved into How, where I followed her. They gave us a food plan, which was no carbohydrates, and we weighed and measured our food, but only for a month. And then I could eyeball my food. So for 14 years, I didn't know that I had an allergy that would always stay in place, which was sugars, grains, carbohydrates. And number 2, I never knew what enough was enough. You couldn't tell me to go to a restaurant with a fist and say, that's how much protein I get. This is how much vegetables I get. Didn't work. And so for 14 years, every 6 months, I relapsed. I lost the weight, I gained the weight, lost the weight, gained the weight. And on August 1st, 1997, my friend in How 12-stepped me into Gray Sheet in Los Angeles and into AA, because that year I started to drink when I was on a business trip. And a voice went off in my head and it said, you just crossed the line, you're an alcoholic. And it startled me. I didn't know who said it, where it came from. But I said to myself, all you have to do, Denise, is not drink and you're going to be okay. But at the end of the year, I was ready to start drinking, not where I left off, but I was going to make up for lost time. And that's the way my binges were in OA and OA How. And so she 12-stepped me on that Saturday morning. We went to an AA meeting in North Hollywood at the Winner's Attitude Adjustment meeting in North Hollywood. And then we went to West Hollywood for the Gray Sheet meeting. And I wasn't too impressed with that either, but I got a sponsor. And after 2 weeks, I mentioned to my sponsor that somebody commented on my meal, and I let them have a taste. And he said, you're back to day 1. I said, why? He said, because you didn't eat what you committed. I said, I did. I said, I gave him, it's less than a teeny. He said, you committed to me that you were going to eat your entire lunch. You didn't do that, nor did you make a phone call. And what he was calling me on was my anorexia. And I stayed, and all the weight came off in 6 months, and I was going to my AA meetings, but I hadn't gotten into the steps. And I started dating in AA, and I hadn't dated in 17 years. And my Gray Sheet sponsor said, I don't think that's a good idea, Denise. She said, work on your program. And what she was telling me to do was get involved in the steps. And I fired her and got a different Gray Sheet sponsor so I could still date this guy. And it was my friend in AA who said to me, you better be honest with Tom. He's not interested in you the way you think he is. And she said, I'm afraid you're going to drink. And she said it in that tone. She had 27 years sobriety, and she was dying of breast cancer at the time. And I said, okay, I'll tell him. And, I kind of casually mentioned it to him. And he said, I'm not that serious, Denise. I said, oh, okay, that's fine, which was a lie. I didn't know how to deal with the disappointment and the resentment, but I kept weighing and measuring my food. got my year anniversary in Gray Sheet, but the resentment kept stewing and stewing and stewing. And 1 month after my anniversary in Gray Sheet, I went to a 7-Eleven and I said, I'm just going to get one of those 25-cent little frozen things. I'll get right back on tomorrow. I wasn't even in step one saying I was powerless. The minute I took that first lick, that little voice went off again and it said, you don't know when you're getting your abstinence back.
10 minutes left, Denise.
Thanks, Nancy. 2.5 years later, I wound up in a 2.5 year period, putting on 65 pounds, selling my house that was almost paid off in Los Angeles, giving up a very good job with benefits at Kaiser, and moving to Charleston, South Carolina, where the only person who was here was my sister, and we didn't even have a relationship. Taking a job that paid me 25% less in salary with no benefits at all. And I didn't know anybody, but AA kept me sober. I started going to AA meetings here. The only thing that was available for me on Gray Sheet was 2 phone bridge meetings on Tuesday and Thursday nights. That was it. And it only allowed 50 people on there at any time. And so Gray Sheet was just coming up on the phone meetings. And that's what I did. I kept going to those meetings and I would read because I could read. I couldn't do any other service. And that's what I did. And there was a Gray Sheeter in New Jersey who said, call me, keep calling me. I said, but I'm not out. She said, keep calling me. And that's what I did. And so I got a sponsor out of Cambridge, started weighing and measuring my food. And after 2 weeks, I was bored because I hadn't lost the 65 pounds. And I grazed, didn't do bags and boxes, just grazed, had the worst reaction to the food I had ever had in my entire life. I thought I had stomach poisoning. I was on 24-hour call for the OR, had to call up my boss to take over the call for me. I told her I had the stomach flu. And I called my Gray Sheet sponsor up the next morning, which was February 27, 2001. And I said, this is what I did. She said, give me your food. I said, my stomach's like glass. She said, are you willing to eat what I tell you to eat? And she said it in that tone. And I said, yes. And that started my current abstinence. And I knew I had to do things differently than I did the first time around, because the first time around didn't keep me abstinent. So things had to change. And my sponsor told me, she said, you got to make outreach calls. She said, I'm not available to you 24/7. I sponsor people. I have a program to work. I work full-time as a teacher. So you got to get some good, strong connections. So that got me to listening at meetings, taking phone numbers down. And I went to my first Gray Sheet retreat in Austin, Texas, and a lovely woman there, a Gray Sheeter, she's got over 40 years now. She sat across the table from me and she said, you know, Gray Sheet didn't promise me that no matter what's going to happen, or that I wouldn't have to take blood pressure pills when I reached 65. That was the only thing I ever remembered out of that retreat. Didn't remember anything anybody said. I remembered what she said. And what she was telling me was, when the no matter what's come up, you still weigh and measure your food. You call somebody and you call until you get a live voice if you can't get your sponsor. And so the no matter what started coming up that first 6 months. I was hit with severe vertigo. I was dizzy 24/7. I was nauseous 24/7. My sponsor told me what to eat 3 times a day. And it was small weighed and measured meals that I could get made in 5 minutes and then go lay down. Got through that. And then I had some emergency surgery. Called up from the emergency room, couldn't get my sponsor, got another Gray Sheet sponsor up in Cambridge. And I said, I can't eat my dinner. I said, the surgeons are taking me to the operating room and they don't want me to eat because they're afraid I'll throw up. And she said, well, call me in the morning. Good luck. I said, okay. So I called her in the morning. She said, can you eat? I said, yeah, they're going to let me eat. But they didn't bring me what I could eat. She said, tell them you want this. And I figured, oh my God, they're going to tell me it's the hospital where I work, that I'm a mean pay. She said, you tell them this is what you need. I said, okay. And so that gave me more strength as I went on in my sobriety. And as I went on in my abstinence and sobriety, I started getting into the literature and I knew I had to do the steps. I didn't do the steps till I had 3 years of solid Gray Sheet abstinence because I was still letting personalities affect me. And finally, I just said, that can't be the situation. And I did my first AWOL in Gray Sheet. And I did it. And I started getting some relief with the spiritual and emotional part of my program. And, you know, situations came up. I was in a 3-year malpractice suit at my job. And I remembered every time the lawyer called, I would sit on the kitchen floor crying, just wanting to drink a gallon of diet soda. And that voice said, pick up the phone and call a GreySheeter. Pick up the phone now, Denise. And I'd say, I don't feel like eating my dinner because the anorexia kicked in. And
5 minutes left, Denise. 5.
See, and that voice said, what'd you tell your sponsor you're going to eat for dinner tonight? I said, blah, blah, blah. She said, you're going to eat that, right? And I said, yes, I am. Felt like a blithering idiot. Hung up the phone, ate my dinner. And, you know, that's the way it's been. You know, I text, but I don't rely on texting. I make sure I get live voices. Do I make those 3 outreach calls plus a day? Yeah, I make those 3 outreach calls plus a day. It's a little bit easier because I'm retired now. Have situations come up? Yeah, 3 years ago, I started with a urologist and they didn't know what was causing me to be peeing up a storm. And finally, I said, after 2 years, I said, could you send me to an endocrinologist? Well, I was diagnosed with a certain form of diabetes that doesn't make a hormone in your brain that controls your fluid balance. And he said, you're on severe fluid restriction because I'm going to put you on the replacement so you don't pee 5 liters a day. And he said, but if you drink without weighing and measuring your liquids, you can go into low sodium. I said, okay, I'll do that. And he said, ice cubes. I said, well, okay, I can do that. And as a result of this diagnosis, I'm off the beverages we can drink on the GreySheet. And people ask me, do you get thirsty only being allowed to drink 2.5 cups of liquid a day? I said, no, not really. However, through the steps, I've learned to go to my higher power immediately when that thought creeps in and says, boy, could I use a 36-ounce big diet Dr. Pepper. And I go, okay, God, I'm not responsible for the first thought, but the second thoughts, you need to just get me out of that thought. So I've accepted the fact that, you know, there's going to be no matter what. So I hear them. I remember Raina, who went through lung cancer with us, and Raina was at the meetings. And I went, she's doing chemo, she's doing this, and she's staying abstinent. And so those people give me hope, but I have peace at my meals. You know, I say a little prayer before my meal that I got at a GreySheet retreat. And it says, dear God, thank you for this meal. It's just the right amount. And some people laugh at me and I go, well, that same meal that I had 2 days ago, that was more than enough. Somehow tonight doesn't look like it's enough. So I better say that prayer. And it always is enough because it's weighed and measured and committed. So I'm going to stop on that. And I'm very grateful. Thank you, Jack, for asking me to share. I know I've got to meet a lot of you people on Zoom because of COVID, which there's my gratitude. Thank you, God, for the Zoom. We got to meet people all over the world. Thanks, no matter what.